Welcome to Highly Sensitive, Happily Married, the podcast that teaches you to not only have an easier marriage as a sensitive woman, but to have one that feels more amazing by the day. Where you'll hear relatable stories, love advice that works, and coaching on how to have a marriage where feeling upset and disconnected is a thing of the past, and where instead a sense of loving connection and even fun and lightness is the norm. I'm Hannah Brooks, highly sensitive person, love expert, and marriage coach, and I'm so happy to be on this journey with you. Hello, my friends. Welcome to episode 96. And if you haven't yet done so, I highly recommend you hit subscribe. When you subscribe, you make sure that you get every episode and you don't miss one. And that's maybe for you going to be especially important right now because I'm actually going to be taking a brief sabbatical. Would you call it a sabbatical? A break from this podcast. And don't worry, I am coming back soon. I'll be taking about a 6-week period off from recording new podcasts in order to, this is where this ties into this episode, to meet some of my own emotional needs and physical needs of just rest. As highly sensitive people, we have perhaps a bigger need for taking care of ourselves, or we maybe need to be more diligent than non-highly sensitive people when it comes to our emotional and physical well-being. And I firmly, truly believe that it's so important for us to kind of have seasons, right? Seasons on, seasons off. And that's actually best for us. I actually think this is true for humans, right? Like if you look at nature, we've got on and off, right? And the harvest isn't always coming in, right? So I actually made a whole episode on this at one point. Episode 80. It's called HSP's 2 modes for best change in marriage. But I actually think it's just the modes we want to be in to thrive as highly sensitive people. And that is that active, right? Sort of more like action-oriented phase. And then there is that nourishment phase, that rest phase. So as part of living what I preach and teach, I'm going to be doing that for myself for a little while. I'm going to be focusing on running my beautiful group Treasured and working with my one-on-one clients, but I'm going to be pausing in recording the podcast. If you don't want to miss time with me every week, I highly recommend you hop on my email list. I will put 2 ways to do so in the show notes, or you can just head over to my website, www.lifeisworthloving. You'll see options on that website as to, like, how to hop on the email list. And on that email list, you will still be hearing from me. Things you might never have heard on the podcast or little reminders. I think my emails are such little gems that just arrive in your inbox. So I highly recommend hopping on that. The other thing is, while I'm not recording new podcasts, it's a great opportunity to go back over, re-listen to ones you want to. I'm going to recommend a few in this podcast, or a couple, and or catch up on ones you've missed. And I'll meet you back here in 6 weeks, really refreshed. But I'm not going anywhere yet. Today we are going to be talking about needs versus wants. I do believe I will dive into another episode kind of on this another angle on this topic. I just think it's such an important topic. And, I hear all the time in the world of relationship improvement, the word needs gets used a whole lot, if you've noticed. And so if you are using it in your own mind, or you're saying it to your partner a lot, it makes sense. You were taught to. Like, he needs to meet my needs, he's not meeting my needs, I'm not meeting his needs, right? These sorts of things. We were taught this. So it's not a wonder that we get our wants and our needs really mixed up when it comes to relationship. Most of us are really confused about this. And again, it's because of what we are taught, what's perpetuated by various teachings about relationships. But getting our wants and needs really mixed up, as most of us do, is not good for us, for our emotional health, and it's not good for our marriages. So today we are going to kind of break apart some of this confusion, hopefully get you some more clarity, actually some real clarity about the difference between wants and needs and how to get your emotional needs met. Because I bet many of you who are used to thinking about my needs, my emotional needs, I bet in many cases those needs aren't getting met in your marriage, right? So I want to help you get your emotional needs met so that you can live with more emotional satisfaction and well-being, right? So that you can have more emotional sovereignty and agency over your experience in your relationship and ultimately have a better marriage for the rest of your life. So that's what we're going to do today. Now, I think the biggest mix-up really is that we use the word needs when what we really have is a want. Now, language really matters. It is how we infuse meaning into our lives, right? And ultimately, our language leads to how we feel and what we create in our lives, right? How we think about things, how we label things, how we language things matters. So we really do want to learn to use these terms properly. We want to learn how to think about needs and wants properly, right? And make sure we're labeling our needs and wants properly. So I want to give you just a little taste of like why language matters in this case, right? I want you to just take a moment to notice the difference when you say, I need ice cream. Okay, now if you don't like ice cream, don't use ice cream. Fill it in with something else, right? I need pizza, right? Notice what that feels like. And how you say this to yourself. I want ice cream. I want pizza. Even right away, you can feel the difference. Yeah? Need is very intense. Want is a little bit more like, ooh, I don't know. That's what it feels like to me. But you notice it for yourself. Yeah? So wants and needs, they're different. They have a different energy and they create very different things in our lives when we're thinking something's a need versus something's a want. Now, again, this is not clear in our world. They're very confused all the time. I had about a decade ago, I hung out with a friend who is a therapist, and I was just chatting with her. I'd had this question for a long time in my own mind, like what's the difference between a want and a need? And I decided to ask my friend who I thought would know because she was a therapist, right? So I asked her, and she sort of surprisingly to me said, I think they're the same thing. And she gave it a little thought, and that was her answer. Like we can use them interchangeably, right? And I sat with this, that wasn't a very satisfying answer to me because I had a real feeling that they weren't. So I've spent the last decade really thinking deeply on this and also seeing the havoc, like really, because I've been paying attention to this for a long time, I've been really able to witness the havoc being mixed up about wants and needs, the havoc that wreaks on our marriages and our relationships. So what I'm going to share with you today really comes from deep inquiry into this and working with clients on this in depth in my own self, in my life. So let's talk about what it looks like and sounds like when we're confused about the difference. So many of us will say or believe things like this. I need more time with you, right? We might say this to our husband. I need more time with you. Or it's just that I have a need for you to speak to me more kindly. Or my top need is to feel loved. I need you to tell me that often. right? I'm probably going to use the example in this episode of like, I need you to come to bed with me on time. I had that one. That was one for me for a while. Like that was what I thought made me feel loved and cared for, right? But here's the thing. When we label these things as needs, it sets us up for disempowerment. It is very disempowering because when your partner doesn't do those things, you end up feeling helpless, discouraged, like he doesn't care. In other words, it makes you feel helpless over your experience when your partner doesn't meet those quote unquote needs. Yeah. Now, I obviously truly want you to have what you most want in your relationship. I want you to feel deeply fulfilled and connected, loved and in love in your marriage. But using the term needs to get that experience, right, to get those feelings in your marriage is not only unnecessary, it will actually make it harder to have all of that. Now, I know that this is the opposite of what you've been taught, probably, what you've heard around left and right? Which is something like, we should have needs and exert them. If our partner doesn't meet them, he's not good for us, or something's wrong with him or us, right? But this leads to so many power struggles and such huge heartache in marriage. Now, if you've been listening to the podcast before, you'll probably have a little bit of a sense of this because I've talked about this less directly in the past. Yeah. And we're going to dive in a little bit in this episode, as to how and why or what kind of heartache and power struggles it leads to. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But let's start off here now by talking about what is a need versus a want, right? Let's define the difference right up front here. Now, there definitely are needs that are of the physical/survival category, right? Food, water, shelter, those kinds of things. That's really not what we're talking about today. We are talking today about emotional needs, right? So as humans, to thrive, we have certain emotional needs that we need to have met, right? In order to thrive, right? Not to survive, but we're on this podcast, we're not talking about surviving. We're talking about thriving, right? So what are our emotional needs? I'm just going to list a few of the basic ones. We need a sense of safety, emotional safety, and that also can come from physical safety, of course, right? We need love. We need belonging. We need connection. And we need a sense of significance, which is like that sense of worthiness and validation, right? Like we matter. And when I say safety, just kind of going back a few, that also means like peace, right? So these are needs. These are emotional needs. But now this is really important. I'm going to repeat this in various ways a bunch during today. How we get these emotional needs met is actually a want, a preference, not a need. There are many ways to feel safety, to arrive at feeling belonging, love, significance, connection. Yeah? There are many paths to getting that need, to feeling that way. But most of us get confused here, right? And we think how we get that need met is what we need, right? How, like the path to getting that feeling of belonging, for example, is the actual need. But the pathway is the want, not the need. So again, the want is how we get that emotional need met. It's our preference for getting there, for arriving at the emotion that we need to have in our lives. Yeah? So I want to give you an example to make this more concrete. So imagine someone says, or maybe this was you, or maybe this was me. It was me in the past, right? I need you to come to bed at the same time I do every night, right? I did. I used to say things like that to my husband. Or, another example might be like, I need you to come home on time after work every evening. Now, I want you to notice when we say this, or this person is saying this, what they're really wanting is a feeling. Yes? This is always the case when we say we need. When we're not talking about survival needs, right? When we're talking about emotional needs. What we're wanting is a feeling. When we boil it down, the need is to feel a certain emotion. And usually when it comes to our marriages, right, and our partners, it's a need to feel loved, right? Valued, significant, safe, treasured, right? So for me, right, if I was saying, I need you to come to bed at the same time I do every night, what I was really saying is like, I want to feel, or I have a need to feel loved. I have a need to feel connected. I have a need to feel significant to you, right? But him coming to bed is just the preferred way I would get to that feeling of being connected and loved and significant to him. Him coming to bed is the want, not the need. All right. So if you have been confusing wants with needs, I want you to know there's no room for self-blame here. It is not your fault. Once again, it is what you've been taught. It's been perpetuated left and right, right? But of course, we internalize it and we start living like that with this mix-up. And what then happens is we end up putting on our partner, putting it on our partner. Does that make sense? Like making it his job to meet our needs, right? Like we think, oh, he needs to meet my need of feeling comforted, of feeling safe, of he needs to reassure he loves me, right? Because we want to feel loved, we want to feel comforted. Those are needs, right? But we want him to tell us, for example. But when we're doing that, it's actually a want, right? We don't need him to do that, to feel that way. We want him to. But we do need to arrive at the feeling of being reassured, of being loved, of being comforted, of being secure. Yep. So those are the needs. But him telling you and reassuring you aren't the needs. They're the wants. I'll probably reiterate that a couple more times in various ways because it's just so important. And I think it's a new thing to hear this and understand this for a lot of people. Now, here's another interesting piece of this. Often we end up putting the meeting of our needs on our husband or partner, right? We look to him to meet our needs, right? We say, you need to do this because we aren't meeting our own needs. This really ties into a recent episode I did about overcare. It's a great one. It's an important one to listen to. So feel free to go back and check that out. Episode 94. I belong to some Facebook groups about marriages and such, and relationships and such. And I recently, at the top of my Facebook feed, came a post from a woman who I thought was just so cool. She was returning to school, like elementary type level school, because her mother had taken her out of school as a kid, as a third grader, right? Now, as a mother and wife, she realized she wanted to go back to school, which I think is so amazing, right? Like, what a brave, powerful decision for herself. And her husband was not being as supportive as she thought he would be or wanted him to be, or he even said he wanted to be. And she was posting in that group because she was really upset about it. But, as I read her post, what I noticed was that she was, of course, expecting him to support her. But interestingly enough, she was really beating herself up about her intelligence. And you could see in the post how she was like telling herself bad things about her capacity to learn and be a student again. So she was expecting her husband to be loving and supportive and cheer her on, but she wasn't even doing that for herself very well. Right? So she was mad at him and seeing him as failing when she was actually doing even worse to herself than him. Like some of the things she was saying in her own head were really mean to herself. Right? And so this is a great example of this, where we don't show up for ourselves, we don't meet our own needs, we don't support ourselves, but then we get disappointed or angry when our husband doesn't show up for us or is unable to. We think he's not meeting our needs, but he's just not meeting what we want. We are the one not meeting our need. Now, often this is because we don't know how to meet our own needs. We're used to thinking other people are supposed to meet our quote unquote needs, but actually what we're doing is believing other people should meet our wants. We call them needs, they're wants, right? So let's talk about that, because that's so important. What makes us call a want a need, other than being taught, right? This is what I believe. We call wants needs as a way to shrug off owning our wants as a desire. Right? Because we don't believe we're worthy of our wants otherwise. Or we aren't empowered enough to stand firm in wanting what we want and feeling good about ourselves and feeling peaceful about ourselves in wanting what we want and claiming what we want. Right? Using the term need is kind of like a way to scapegoat out of standing proud and firm in what you want. It's like we don't think we're like we deserve to give ourselves something, right? Or to have something we want unless we call it a need. Like it's selfish if we give ourselves something that we want, right? We think we need to label wants as needs for them to matter. Calling it a need, it feels like more justified somehow. Right? If we frame it as a need in our mind, we don't have to we don't have to courageously love and believe in ourselves, which so many of us lack the skill of doing. Like enough to simply claim it as a want. Like saying, I want this. I want to feel loved, for example. So I'm going to get to work to bring it to myself, to give it to myself, to learn how to bring it to myself, or to ask for it. Right? It's easier to label it a need and try to put it on someone else. I totally get it. It's less work, right? And it feels really lovely when someone else is able to do that and does that. When someone else does reassure us, does show up with loving words and gestures and actions, right? It feels lovely. I get it. But that's not a great reason to call it a need. Right? Not knowing how to do it yourself, not being willing to do it yourself, not having the kind of willingness to learn how to grow in those ways or just get proactive for yourself. And specifically, it's not a great reason because of the problems that it causes in our marriages. So when we are mixing up wants and needs, what oftentimes happens is we end up demanding things from our partner, right? We're like giving him a list of jobs that he's supposed to do for us to meet our needs, right? Expecting him to behave in prescribed ways, which, and this is where the reality check comes in, and this is really where when we run into trouble, is it may not be at all how he wants to be with you or what he's capable of. This is kind of where the love languages come in and are problematic at times, right? We're like, oh, this is my love language. He needs to speak words of affection in order to my need of feeling loved to be met, right? But then a lot of guys aren't great at that, yeah? And they're not comfortable with it. They aren't socialized. He wasn't socialized maybe to be all lovey-dovey with his words. Or he might be just focused on meeting his own needs, trying to meet his own, maybe not even being very good at that, right? Because none of us have been taught beautifully how to meet our own needs, right? So he's not at a place necessarily to be capable of doing that. And I want to say, like, as males, how they're socialized, and maybe even their brain differences, they're not necessarily going to feel the appeal of some of the ways you like to get your needs met, right? It doesn't come naturally for many men either. It also feels demanding sometimes. And I'm not saying this is true with your partner. Everyone's situation is unique. I just see this time and time again with my clients, is their partner oftentimes will end up feeling like it's a duty he has to tend to your emotional life, or you think that's a duty he has. And it puts a lot of pressure on him. When duty is what a marriage becomes about, it will always lead to a relationship being sucked of the juicy richness and joy and lightness that we love as women. And our partners love as well. We love as humans, right? And it oftentimes leads to our partner feeling controlled, right? Like he's falling short, like he can't do anything right, right? That whole cycle I often talk about on the podcast, about where he doesn't feel safe to be himself, or he doesn't feel like he's doing it right, right? And that can lead to like a growing apathy, or even kind of a rebellion from his end of like, I don't want to do this for you anymore. I don't have it in me anymore, right? Or just like him being more withdrawn and unwilling, less willing to be affectionate. Or I'm just using the example here of like the words of affection, right? Saying those loving things to you because he feels like he's demanded to, and like he's not good enough at it for you. And of course, this also leads to you being completely disappointed, or feeling really resentful that he's not doing his job, right? Or really frustrated, and then ultimately thinking more and more poorly of this person who you most want to love, right? And looking down on him because he's not meeting your needs. He's not doing the thing he's supposed to do as your partner. Yeah, you see? Not a good cycle, a pretty vicious cycle. And you can see how this can lead to the collapse of relationships, of marriages, or at least the ease and affection and intimacy that you love, that you both love. And it leaves you in a powerless place where your emotions are kind of just all over the place, depending on him, what he's doing or what he isn't doing. Right? So hear this. When we source our emotional needs externally, when we confuse them with wants, right, we're actually giving up our own capacity to have those needs actually get met. Let's take the example of feeling loved and treasured. If you kind of outsource that need to him and his actions, like if you're like, I will feel loved when you come to bed with me, right? I'll feel treasured by you if every night you choose to come to bed with me. What you're actually setting yourself up for and your marriage up for is major disappointment, right? Because sometime he won't want to come to bed with you, for example, right? If your feeling loved is contingent on him coming to bed at the same time as you have no control over whether you feel loved or not. It's 100% in his hands. It's a very powerless place to be. It's deciding, right, or it's thinking that the external situation is what dictates how you feel. It's giving up your personal sovereignty and agency and authorship of your life and your experience in your marriage, right? Your personal agency, is the most exquisite right and privilege that you have as a human being, right? The power over your own experience and interior domain, right? Your emotional life. I don't think any of us really want to give that up. Maybe we do need to learn how to have that. And I think that's one of the big issues, right? We just don't know how to have that or really embrace or embody that. We don't know how to use that right fully. And so we put it on other people. Right? But when we do put it on other people, we end up giving up that privilege, that exquisite privilege we have. And, another twist to all this, like the less that we are willing to meet our own wants and needs, like the more we make that our partner's job, the more we send ourselves the signal that we don't really matter, that we are powerless, that our needs aren't important enough to us, to ourselves to meet them. The more we don't prioritize our own needs and we put them on someone else, the more we, on some deeper level, receive the message from ourselves that we aren't that important to ourselves. And so what can oftentimes happen then is that we then need someone else to make up for that lack of importance we feel for ourselves by showing us that we're important. Does that make sense? It's a pretty vicious cycle. So, obviously not great results comes from this confusion between wants and needs. But it totally makes sense that we approach it this way, and this happens because we do have emotional needs, and we need to have them met to thrive. Yeah? And we just haven't learned how to meet our needs properly. Yeah? That's why all this happens. We haven't distinguished the difference, which you now understand much better than you did half an hour ago. But we also maybe haven't learned how to meet your own needs properly, right? And of course we have a preference for our partner to meet our emotional needs, right? We want him to do that because it's lovely. It feels lovely, like I said earlier, right? It's kind of like the sweet, easy route, but it actually isn't, considering everything I just said and what it actually leads to. Very painful, very problematic. So let's get really clear and simple about this again. The emotion is the need. The path by which you get that emotion is your want, your preference, the preferred method you want to have that need met, right? So the path that it arrives is not the need. So again, just to make sure you've got this piece, because it's like the key takeaway from this. Like my example that I keep coming back to is like, I need you to come to bed when I do every night. Perhaps the emotional need, if that's one for you, is to feel connection or significance or valued, right? These things are true needs. But the fact of the matter is that you don't need your partner to come to bed with you every night or any night, ultimately, to feel that way. That's a misconception. You just prefer for him coming to bed every night, for that to be the way the need, say feeling valued and connected, is delivered, right? But that's really just the preference or the want. Next level here to really understand is the want is optional. The path by which it gets met, in this example, him coming to bed every night with you, that is optional. Yes, in an ideal world, our need would get met in that lovely way we want it to, with him coming to bed with you every night. Yeah? Totally get it. That would be an ideal world. That would be amazing. But in this here world that we live in, this non-ideal world, that's not reality here on this planet. Yeah? With these humans that we share this planet with. But that doesn't mean you have to live without your need being met. Did you hear that? Everything I'm saying does not mean you need to live without your need being met. Not at all. You can absolutely get them met, but just not consistently in the exact path you want them to get met. Like, yes, you need to feel loved. Of course you do. But getting that feeling comes in all different kinds of ways. And that's amazing news. because it gives you so many options to get that need met. Now, if your husband does happen to kind of deliver meet those needs in the preferred way you want him to, amazing. And most partners will to some degree, and even want to some of the time, right? But even when he doesn't, that's cool because there's so many options for you to get that need met. Yeah. When your preference isn't available, like, for example, my husband, he doesn't want to come to bed with me every night. He's got things he likes to do. He likes to stay up late and play music. It would not be good for our marriage if I told him I needed him to, right? Or if I thought I needed him to. If I believed that was a true need of mine. But I don't anymore. I know there are other options for me to get that feeling of connection that I want with him or to feel loved by him. Yeah? Just like for you, there are options, other options for how you can get that need met. And these are options that you are in control of, that aren't in your partner's hands. That's really powerful. Doesn't depend on him for you to get that need met. We have the ability to meet our own needs, especially when we learn how. But the problem is most of us haven't learned, right? We don't have the skills of emotional agency or emotional sovereignty. Yeah, most of us haven't been developed them. I just had a client say, she keeps saying it like on every session. She's like, I don't understand why they don't teach this stuff in school. Like, why don't therapists teach this stuff? I'm so confused. I've gone to therapists for like decades and they never taught me this. This is like magic. This is amazing, right? She's been developing this skill of emotional agency, but was never taught before because most of us aren't. Yeah, which is why coaching is so powerful, which is why I love what I do. Rocks people's worlds, changes their lives forever. So if you have a need to feel more emotionally safe, for example, you can feel that way, even if your partner isn't able or isn't wanting to do the thing you want to help you feel that way, right? If you have a need to feel belonging, you can feel that way. Even if you don't get it in your preferred way, you know, through your hubby's compliments or words or actions. Yeah? How you feel is under your control. You are in charge of that. And there's so many ways to support yourself to meet these needs for yourself, these emotional needs, to bring yourself to these places you need to go emotionally to thrive, right? It may take more work, more focus, more effort on your end than him just doing it automatically, right? But if he's not doing it automatically, if he's not a master at doing it, like most of our partners aren't, there's very few, maybe none, no partners in the world who are expert at that constantly and consistently, right? So like as an example, if you're a little bit insecure, like so many of us are as humans, you actually can over time build lots of self-confidence and security in yourself and feel awesome about yourself, even if your husband doesn't tell you you're amazing a lot or give you lots of compliments and sort of lift you up that way. Yeah. You don't actually need him to feel confident and secure. It might take some work, right, on your end. But it's 100% available to you from yourself. And when you learn to do this, when it's no longer your husband's job or duty to meet your needs for you, and when you have learned how to meet your own needs, like that's easy for you, it becomes like natural for you to always meet your own needs. And of course you can still have wants, but when those wants aren't delivered on, your needs can still be met by you. When you're able to do that, the results on your marriage, the positive impact in your marriage is incredible. There's so much more lightness, so much more sense of companionship, so much more respect, so much more room for actual enjoyment and joy and freedom for both of you. because it's no longer this relationship based on need or false need, really, and duty, right? There's so much more love that just suddenly becomes available. That's what we all want anyway, right? All of that I just mentioned. And there's some even more good news. You can learn to meet those emotional needs of yours in a very satisfying way, even if it's not your preference to do it that way right now. It can even become your preference to meet your own need over time because it's like innate, it's in you, right? Because you don't have to depend on anyone. It can become preferred because it's so much more powerful, right? And the results of meeting your own needs in these ways are so delicious for your marriage, yeah? And then your marriage actually becomes more and more, this is the ironic part, right? Your marriage actually becomes more and more of the source of that emotional nourishment. Like the want part of this is met more easily because there is this like culture between you of more respect than ever, of more enjoyment than ever, of more lightness than ever, right? And it's from that place that it's easier for your partner to want to go for meeting your emotional needs more because it's fun for him. This makes sense? It's really it's actually a positive snowball effect and really just deeply liberating for both of you. I think of it as like this unshackling, right? Like both of you getting to toss off these chains that have been weighing down your marriage for a while. So, as I've said before, if you want a light, loving, connected marriage, devote yourself to meeting your own needs, to your own happiness, right? To your own fulfillment, to your own sense of being loved. Devote yourself to meeting your emotional needs. Now, this episode isn't the episode where I go into all the ways we actually do that. I've talked about it here and there on the podcast, right? If you've been listening, if you're a devoted listener, you'll have picked up a lot around that in this podcast. But if you want some specifics, I highly recommend you go check out the episode Being a Happy, Fulfilled Wife, episode 44. You'll notice if you listen to that one that some of what I talked about is very similar, but it's using a fairly different language. And I go into a couple keys in that episode to help you meet your emotional needs, as I'm calling it in this episode. Now, I do want to say that as a sensitive person, it's not always easy to learn how to meet our own needs. Or like there's a learning curve. I mean, for all of us, there's a learning curve, but I think as highly sensitive people, it can be even a little bit more challenging based on some of our programming and inclinations, as I talked about on that overcare episode. Again, episode 94, a couple episodes back. Because there is this tendency for a lot of us as highly sensitive people to kind of be programmed to, and as women especially, as to kind of put others before our own needs, right? So we've been sort of conditioned to constantly be putting other people first. So there's this extra learning curve for us, extra growth curve here. To even feel like it's okay to meet our own needs. Yeah? You've been practicing the opposite for a long time, many of you, right? Meeting other people's needs at the expense of yourself. So it's not going to be easy to necessarily just switch that around, right? And feel so great about learning how to meet your own needs. So the work will really involve what I call stewarding your own mind, right? And insourcing your own emotions, as you've heard me say before, right? Learning where they really come from and how to free yourself from the thought patterns and the old conditioning, and how to free yourself from staying stuck in the negative emotions, right? And learning how to guide yourself to safety, to love, to belonging, to connection, to significance. Right? It will mean developing emotional sovereignty, right? And all the skills that I teach in depth with my clients. So you know that if you're ever compelled to be my client, I would absolutely love to have you, and you'll learn all of this in depth, and it's the most empowering, transformative thing for your marriage and for your life. But I do want to point you again to a couple of episodes right now that will, while I'm gone for these 6 weeks from the podcast, that you can dig into a little bit if you are wanting to learn some of the how. Well, how do I, learn to meet my own needs? How do I insource my own emotions? How do I break conditioning of my, my conditioning that's leading to not meeting my own needs, or leading to, not feeling safe, loved, belonging, connection, significance. Actually, I just want to refer you to one episode because this is a directory episode which will refer you to other episodes. It is a bonus episode. It is called The Best Love Comes from Understanding Your Own Brain and Nervous System. And it doesn't have a number. It sits, because it's a bonus episode, so it sits between episode 93 and episode 92. So one thing I do want to make sure I say before I say goodbye today is that you don't always, all of what I'm saying doesn't mean it's always going to be 100% up to you to always meet your own needs, to always insource your own emotions and all of this, right? Yes, it's incredibly powerful to learn to do so and to rely primarily on yourself for those basic needs to be met. But you also get to decide what are non-negotiable wants for you. What wants you won't live without. Right? And you get to decide to not settle for less. That decision is up to you. But I want to be clear to say, today, I want to be really clear. Don't call wants needs. Call wants wants. It's so empowering to distinguish the difference and start calling these things what they really are. You still get to decide what you won't settle for not having, or the wants you won't settle for living without, right? I call those non-negotiable wants, and we will be talking about this probably in the next episode, although that's some weeks away at this point. So look forward to that. I'm excited to talk about this piece of this as well. So, my friends, I will talk to you again with a new episode in about 6 weeks or so. We'll see exactly what it pans out to be. In the meantime, enjoy listening to other episodes, and make sure to hop on my email list if you haven't. Again, you can do so by either just clicking the direct link in the show notes, or grabbing the direct or clicking the other direct link in the show notes about the 7 most powerful phrases to deepen connection. If you don't have that book, you really should totally grab it, because there's lots of good stuff in there. It's really going to be helpful for your relationship. And the other way you can hop on my email list is just to head over to www.lifeisworthloving.com and either grab the 7 most powerful phrases to deepen connection in your marriage, or find the other spot where it just says hop on my email list. And I will see you in your inbox. Be oh so well, my friend.